What a sham, the most pro-union president. Well, he uses the word, that's something new. Well, what did he do with the railroad workers? He mercilessly, cynically crushed their strike.
We have now on the line Chris Townsend, former International Organizing Director for the Amalgamated Transit Union. He was also staff for UE, the United Electrical Workers Union, and
returning guest, friend of the show. One of the big reasons that William Z. Foster has had another day in the sun, so to speak. So, Chris, we really appreciate you coming on to talk to us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am all of that and then some. And, I appreciate the chance to talk about this strike. It's everybody says that every strike is important, and this one certainly is to the transit union. And it's an unnecessary strike, but this is sadly what the world has turned into with the way that the politicians manage these things. Maybe I'll just describe briefly what's at play in the strike, or who, what, when, where.
Yes, absolutely. We want to start with that. Who, what, when, where, and where are we at right now? I know that the strike has been going on for a few weeks, and then you personally have some background on the strike. You've been involved with some of these workers before this strike began, so I'm interested in going to that. But yeah, let's start off with what is going on in Loudoun County, Virginia.
Yeah, this is, thank you. This is the Amalgamated Transit Union. It is the largest of the bus and rail transit union. And in any event, it's out in Loudoun County, Virginia, which is the far west suburbs of Washington, D.C. And it's an area that has totally been transformed in the last several decades from an old, sleepy, southern horse country run by reactionary Democrats and eventually Reagan Republicans. But it has shifted politically in a much more liberal direction, and it's also grown immensely, and the cost of living out there has gone through the roof. It's a bedroom community for a lot of very wealthy commuters that come down to Washington, D.C. So anyway, it never had a transit system 30 years ago, but it over time developed one, and it now has 140 workers plus management and whatever else they pay. So it's become a substantial operation run by Loudoun County. And in any case, when I was the organizing director of ATU, I went out there, I guess it was 2016. The original group were the commuter bus operators. That was the largest group, and it brought the white-collar commuters down to Washington, D.C. And in any case, I went out and met with them in 2016 because they had been in another union. The other union kicked them out. It was a totally dissatisfying experience. I won't go into it, but it was a broken situation. But there was still core of workers that wanted a real union. So I went out and rejected all those who poo-pooed, oh, you can't organize these people. They didn't want to belong to that union. They won't belong to this union. I mean, it was nonsense. I thought, no, I'll go out there. And back then, it was run by a different French multinational company called Transdev, thoroughly contemptible anti-union company, separate from the current company, which I'll get to in a second. But in any case, we had to go through one hell of a fight with the Transdev Corporation, including the company setting up an old-fashioned company union to try to keep us out. Well, it didn't work. We kept at it. We defeated them, organized an ATU group up there with Transdev, and managed to bargain a decent first contract. And we're doing our thing. The pandemic comes. Well, the pandemic, as everyone can imagine, reduced the number of commuters dramatically. But it also was the time when the county was rebidding the contract for the company that was going to operate it. It's all private. It's a public agency, but it's a private company. So what do? They do their usual routine, which does not include due diligence about the company that's putting in the too good to be true low bid, which in this case was the Keolis Corporation, which is essentially the French state railways, SNCF. It's a long established company, big, huge, in France, highly unionized in France. And then they set up shop over here a number 20 years ago or so, and they're trying to put their own footprint in the United States. So here in Washington, D.C., they have two commuter groups and transit groups, Loudoun County and one down in Prince William County. So in any case, this Keolis Corporation lands on the scene. We had dealt with this corporation in a few other places, including myself. I had to go out to Las Vegas for a couple of months to settle the ATU contract with Keolis there. Keolis operates the strip buses that you see when you're out there doing your tourism. But in any case, Keolis comes on the scene. The liberal Democrats who run the county now, and I guess we'll say we're grateful for that. It's better than reactionary Republicans or worse. But those folks, again, not having done any due diligence about this situation, we essentially reached the point where we predicted this strike. They allowed this company, Keolis, onto the property, allowed them to bid low, and then we go into immediately upon in 2021 and early 22, when Keolis assumed the service from the other company, the other French company, they immediately attacked the workforce and refused to recognize the union, and we were off to the races. And what took place then was a full year or more of fight to just save the union. The employer was determined to combine the unit commuter group with a new and growing group of paratransit workers who had been unorganized. Even though we represented a majority of them, they refused to recognize us. Unfair labor practice charges piled up to the ceiling. The workers were harassed and aggravated with this. Here they had a union. Now here comes a new company. And no care was taken by the contracting politicians to ensure that their union would continue. So we had a life and death fight just to save the union. Well, we prevailed. We beat that back. And our group then was the combined group, which is who's on strike now. It's commuter coach, paratransit, mechanics, some other folks. And from day one, Keolis had laid out, at least they were honest, is that our goal is to destroy the union. And we survived through this, what was then the second union election that we had to win, and these workers had to endure to preserve the union. But then now the company essentially says, hey, this is our last and final offer, take it or leave it. The workers said, screw you, we're going to strike. And we've been on strike out there now for more or less a month. And it's been, it's always a difficult thing for workers. These are not highly paid workers. That's the problem. They're grossly underpaid compared to their peers here in the greater Washington, D.C. area. There's an awful lot of issues besides wages, health insurance. Imagine that in 2023, we still have workers who are, lodging health insurance problems as and the cost of health insurance as one of their strike issues. So we've been out for about a month, and I guess I'll wrap up, and then I know you guys want to have a discussion. This group of Democrats that run the county have sat on their hands for a month now. Now here they employ this corporation. They're the political leadership of the county that actually have a contract with this corporation to do this work. The company is not performing the work, and by that contract, they have the ability to penalize this company. Well, they won't do it, and they're not doing it. And it's shameful, and this goes on over and over again throughout the transit industry, where you have the contracting political agency, which is really in cahoots with the company that they hired. I think what needs to happen here in Loudoun County is a significant investigation of this transit agency and its senior staff who are in cahoots with this corporation. They're not managing this corporation. They're cooperating with this corporation, not invoking the terms of their own contract, and therefore extending the length of the strike, because the corporation is not experiencing the kind of pinch that it would, like the members are, when the strike comes on. So that may be a little bit of inside baseball for folks, but
I don't think that's inside baseball. I think that's incredibly important. And what are the elected officials who are responsible for managing this corporation, are they giving any sort of justification for just ignoring the contract, the terms of the contract that they have with this entity?
Yeah. I'm retired now, although I live here and I've been in touch with workers up there. I mean, I lived with these workers for years. I knew them. I helped beat back both attacks that I mentioned. And the ATU has local 869 staff and international union staff working on this thing. But from a distance and what I've read in the media and what I've gleaned from speaking to people that I'm acquainted with involved in this, that there's no explanation for why they won't invoke these penalties. Now, we know that one of the senior transit agency spokespersons repeated the baloney that we hear other places, which is, we can't get involved in the negotiations. Well, that's not quite true. What he's saying is we won't get involved. We're too lazy, too afraid, too anti-union to get involved in this. And I should stop and say, guys, the dilemma that we have here, when you go all the way back to the beginning, is that these transit agencies have to hire a professional staff to run their own system. And they hire a senior staff from all over the country, very professional people, very learned in many cases, but incredibly anti-union in most cases. The business schools in the United States, the whole industry is anti-union. They have no respect for the workers' right to organize. At best, they'll consider the union sort of a necessary, an evil that they can't unload and get rid of. So as this slice of the transit agency management has become permeated with this anti-union bigotry, worse and worse with every year, it doesn't really matter who the political leadership is that's managing them. I mean, the effect to the Loudoun County workers here is the same, whether they're Democrats, as we now see, or Republicans. We would have fully expected the Republican political agency, for instance, the old Loudoun County regime, would have handled it exactly the same. Don't invoke the contract, don't penalize the company, give them some slack. They'll starve the workers out. The union will either die down or go away. Well, we happen to have liberal Democrats who say the right things. But look, guys, we have a president of the United States, Joe Biden. What a sham. He's the most pro-union president. Well, he uses the word. That's something new. He'll show up at a union event. He'll take a lot of money from the labor movement. You could make the case he was probably elected because of the labor movement. But what did he do with the railroad workers here most recently? Mercilessly, cynically crushed their strike over an issue that is a basic human right. I mean, that's another discussion. But I mean, when you have the top Democrats setting the standard for complete, anti-unionism, why would we expect it all the way down the chain in Loudoun County that the Democratic Party there and the leadership would suddenly want to defy that and say, no, we're going to vigorously defend the rights of these workers and their union? It doesn't work that way in the United States. And any trade unionist who's been at it for at least 2 weeks already knows this. Democrats at best are an unreliable occasional ally, but we're trapped. I mean, we have no allies elsewhere, so we take what we can get. So anyway, the agency, to my knowledge, as of late last week, still had not invoked any of these penalties. And this is a strike that will continue until some of this justice is won by these workers. We've defeated this in other strikes here in the area, because maybe I'll mention that the transit union here should be recognized for something, although the current leadership of the union seems oblivious to this. But in the period of time that I was the organizing director, we organized 13 new transit units in Northern Virginia. Now, everybody knows there's people running all over creation, yelling up and down, jumping up and down, organize the South, organize in the South. I mean, you guys hear this all the time. I'm all for it, just like you are. But we've done it in ATU. We've also organized several other transit agencies in other parts of the South. But this is what it means to get out here and do this. And then, of course, once you organize workers, you have to bargain a contract and you have to fight the tough fight. And this is a tough fight because, the ATU is a very Democratic Party, an extremely Democratic party-oriented union. And now they find themselves on strike against a political leadership that is Democrat and is hiding out.
Right.
best I can tell, hoping that it will resolve one way or the other and they won't have to get involved. Well, tough.
I'm wondering if you could talk to us about some of the some of how this this transit system was unionized, because it's pretty impressive to the idea that this went from an unorganized unit of workers in the South that the union that now represents them, some of the international leadership was saying, no, there's really no use in organizing these folks, to now these people have won 2 elections and are on a month-long strike, which going on strike at all, agreeing to go on strike, voting to go on strike, that in and of itself is a pretty big sign of a, or it's a, it's a sign of commitment to the cause, to each other, that a lot of people don't have. And then being able to stay out on strike for a month is something that, most workers in this country are never going to do. And these people have done it after having won, like you said, 2 elections. And so what was the process of how did that happen?
Well, I think in broad brush, what we've got here, and that's why I touched on it. I mean, we've got a labor movement and a left wing in this country that like to jump up and down, or some like to jump up and down and make the demand to organize the South. Well, that's a great goal. And the fact is, in the ATU, we're doing it. I did it. The current organizing director is doing it, and that will continue. But I think the crisis is, I use that word crisis, the disastrous crisis, is that the vast majority of the trade union movement in the United States doesn't even attempt to organize in the South. There are some who do, to their tremendous credit. And ATU had that concentration and succeeded, and found what you will find if you go out and talk to workers in the South, just like you'll find if you talk to workers just about anywhere else. They're horribly exploited, underpaid, benefits have been destroyed, they're thrown away at a moment's notice. And when the discussion comes up about trade unionism, if the union is serious to work with them and is willing to persist and be relentless about it, significant success can be had. But we find this crisis. I mean, here we are in Northern Virginia, just across the river from the District of Columbia in Maryland. Once you cross the Potomac River and enter Northern Virginia from that side, the union density drops by about 75%. Now, that's not because the population over here is any more or less pro or anti-union than on that side. It's because the amount of effort put forward by the trade union movement here in Northern Virginia is minuscule compared to the other side. Now, some of this is frankly because it's a so-called right to work state. Nobody has to belong to the union. The union has to earn its keep every single day and keep people in there making their financial contribution and their activism contribution. And we dealt with that. I mean, you're not going to get everybody. And you're absolutely right. I mean, this was a remarkable organizing group. I had total confidence that we could organize it because, again, we were doing other organizing in the region here, and I knew that this would work. The other union kept trying to get people to ratify a contract that had a 25-cent per year increase, and they tried repeatedly to get them to ratify it, and people just dropped out of that union. And then that union did what they called disclaim them. They just wrote a letter and said, you're free to go, and we have no longer any interest in this. And then a couple of them picked up the phone, called me at the International Union, and I said, sure, I'll come right out. And I went out, and I wasn't sure how it was going to happen when I was driving out there, but I went out and went into the garage, actually. It was conducting a union meeting with these folks to explain how ATU membership would work and how we would reorganize them, the kinds of goals and things that we would do. Well, even though it's a county garage, it's public property. The transit company at that time, Transdev, they of course had me, they gave me the heave-ho off the property under threat of arrest. So I said, screw you. And I went out, and my pickup truck was on the public street. So I went up in the back of my pickup truck, and I just conducted a lunchtime meeting. The commuter workers have a big, long break between their morning and afternoon. It's a split shift situation. So I ran a meeting with about 45 people in the street, and it was exciting because people wanted organization. They didn't want a union that wouldn't listen to them. They didn't want a union that would decide for them what was best. They wanted a lot more than 25 cents an hour, because again, it's an extremely wealthy area now, in the top 10 counties in the United States, and these workers can barely afford to live there because of the cost of housing, among other things. So anyway, we started the ATU organizing that day in 2016. The next day, the Transdev Corporation, again, the predecessor company to Keolis, set up a company union. It was very divisive and confusing, which is what it's for. And it took about 6 more months for workers to see that the company union was never going to answer any of the questions. And we started up our drive. We crushed them in an election, and it was 65-4, I think, in that first Transdev election for ATU. And, here we are. But then here comes Keolis barging into the situation, underbidding dramatically the Transdev Corporation. And then the political leadership, even though it had improved on paper, and many unions, including ATU, had supported these Democrats out there, they found themselves with a very bitterly anti-union company. I should mention, this was not because they talked to ATU. They conducted no due diligence. You might have thought that the contracting county would have said, hey, let's talk to at least one of the unions in the transit field to see what they know about the Keolis. Well, that never happened.
Right.
Never. And in any case, the Keolis company had forced a strike just a little more than a year ago in Reno, Nevada, on the Teamsters who represent Keolis in Reno. And it was I think it was about a 2-month strike, very bitter strike. And their relationship out there was still horrible because of the anti-union nature of this company. Now, the Loudoun County folks, were oblivious to that because they don't want to know this. They only want to know what the company will tell them. And they're like-minded ideology when it comes to how they feel about workers and whatnot. Like I said, folks can deny that. Folks can claim that they're not. Well, they're bigots. They're anti-union bigots, either consciously or unconsciously. And one of the things I'm working on is, we've got other unions in the Keolis company. Keolis in North America is a relatively small company. It's mostly rail. It does commuter rail. It does the Boston commuter rail, the heavy rail, and it does the Alexandria, Northern Virginia rail system. And it has a sprinkling of a dozen or so bus systems around the country. And we had already done some of this previously, but the different unions who work for the company need to be pulled together to have sort of a common knowledge of what's going on, and that will be a parallel event to the strike, but it will help. And the last thing I'll say, the thing that the ATU and other unions need to draw from this is that I think the day has come that I predicted multiple times. The previous president of ATU, Larry Hanley, was well aware of this, that sooner or later, some company on the privatized end, there's about 8 or 9 privatized companies of any size that the ATU deals with. We knew that sooner or later one would emerge who would run a very anti-union program, a union liquidation program, as part of their business model, to try to put a footprint into North America in a non-union fashion, in an anti-union fashion. I think that day is here. It's certainly here with Transdev. That company has grown to become the second largest privatized company that ATU deals with. Now here we have Keolis following in the footsteps. And, for them, it's a political, it's an ideological fight. And I think this group of workers up there are really to be commended for having taken this on. This is a large multinational company. It's shameful that it's the French state railways doing this, but what's new in the United States? Workers are trashed. What's new about that? But anyway, these
so
workers.
Has there been any movement in negotiations? Do we have any idea of if there has been any movement or any potential like light at the end of the tunnel for these workers in the struggle?
I'll be careful because I'm not doing the bargaining and I am retired, so I should be careful. But my best sense of it is that the company essentially at the beginning of the strike, what precipitated the strike was they said, here's our final offer, take it or leave it, screw you. And the workers said, hell you, we're going to want strike. And they've been on strike now for a month. Now, there have been some negotiations in there. I'm not involved in them and whatnot, but I'm unaware of any today. I'm not unaware of any real indications that this thing is close to settlement or, I think it will come together. The history of transit strikes in this fashion are that they last a few weeks, a month or two, and that's that. I mean, at a certain point, let's mention at least one time the worst victims of this entire thing, at least on the equal with what the workers have to do, which is the passengers.
Right.
I mean, the folks who run that transit agency have just unceremoniously dumped these human beings who depend on this service, paratransit and commuter both, and the other things. And they've never even been mentioned in this conversation. ATU would be the only ally that they have. And it's sad. I mean, can you imagine the bus system is just shut down because the agency will not invoke its own contract and bring the parties to bear. So the negotiations, I believe, are sort of continuing, but the positions are pretty much dug in. And it's going to take an equalizer at some point in time. And I think that ATU and these workers are going to stand strong like we have at other places. We had a legendary strike 3 years ago against the Transnet Corporation, also in Northern Virginia, at a place called the Cinderbed Road facility. That was an 84-day strike, and it was a tremendous victory for the union. But it took an 84-day strike by a similarly sized group to defeat this anti-union bigotry that these corporations just bring with them almost genetically.
Yeah, and this is Adam jumping in here. It just reminds me of our conversations we've had, today, and of course over the last 2 years about the Warrior Met Coal, who has a very similar mentality regarding the UMWA members down in Brookwood. And it's clear that it's really not about money. I mean, they would make more money had they settled the strike, 20 months ago. But what they are committed to doing is trying to bust the union.
Right.
And I appreciate you naming that for what it is. It is an anti-union bigotry that is ingrained in the management of these companies and in so many of the politicians who are supposed to be overseeing these companies.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, when I was a kid 44 years ago, joining the ATU the first time, and I have, as you mentioned, Jacob, I have belonged and worked for other unions. But when I was trained by the old timers, they always said to me, there's a three-headed hydra of evil here that we're going to be up against. We're going to be up against racists, anti-Semites, and anti-union bigots. Now, maybe we've made some progress on the racism and the anti-Semitism. Hallelujah for that, limited as it may be, but some progress. We haven't made any progress on the anti-union bigotry. Organizing and conducting your union work today in the United States is a virtually illegal act. And it shouldn't be. I mean, the stated goal of the National Labor Relations Board, this would at least cover the private sector workers, is to be an advocate for the workers, to equalize what is a grossly unequal situation. Well, the theme of that is long ago been lost. It's been polluted with corporate ideology, and the anti-union bigotry has seeped back in, with some exceptions. There are always some politicians and some NLRB staff, and who will stick up for this, but it's not enough. It's not, and the proof of that assertion would be, look at the condition of the working class today. What an appalling third world condition in many industries, getting worse, which is why I think we're seeing increasing rebellions like this strike, and in all the other places, Starbucks being a fine example of that, Amazon, Trader Joe's, and all the more conventional industries, high tech even. Who could have imagined high tech workers, Google, Apple, joining a union? Well, at a certain point, people are driven to the limit and they rebel. and I welcome it. And I know you guys do too.
Hell
there's
yeah.
going to have to be some thunder before the rain. Here we go.
Absolutely. Chris Townsend, thank you so much for taking the time with us again today. We appreciate it.
Thank you both. Good luck.
All right.
Appreciate it, Chris.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.
Which side are you on?